True story, kicked from my home, my kids laughed. Until my final act left them begging. Have you ever felt your own child look you in the eye and lie to you? Have you ever felt your own child look you in the eye and lie to you? Have you ever felt your own child look you in the eye and lie to you? Or worse, look right through you as if you were nothing more than an ATM, a forgotten piece of furniture in their lavish lives? I have. And that feeling, that deep, gut-wrenching betrayal, taught me the biggest lesson of my life. It's a hard lesson, one filled with pain and heartache, but ultimately, it set me free. I'm Alara, and for decades, I poured my life, my love, and every single penny I ever earned into my family. Bronwyn, my daughter, was my world. From the moment she was born, a tiny bundle of joy with wide, curious eyes, I envisioned a life for her filled with possibilities, free from the struggles I had known. And her husband, Thorn, well, I tried to treat him like my own son, welcoming him into our lives with an open heart, believing he would be a loving partner to Bronwyn and a good father to their future children. Their children, my grandchildren, Callan and Lyra, they were the absolute apple of my eye. I loved them fiercely, truly, with every fiber of my being. Their laughter was music to my ears, their innocent faces a balm to my soul. I wanted to give them everything I never had, ensure their lives were filled with comfort and joy, a smooth path laid out before them. But somewhere along the way, that love, that boundless generosity, it turned into something ugly. It became an expectation, a perceived right, and eventually, a sharp, cold weapon they used against me. The final straw, the moment everything shattered beyond repair, it happened just a few months ago. I still remember it with crystal clarity, every single nauseating detail imprinted on my mind. It was a Tuesday evening, around 7 o'clock. The last rays of the setting sun were casting long shadows through the grand bay windows of the living room, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The Holloways, as they liked to call themselves, Bronwyn, Thorn, and the golden children Callan and Lyra, had gathered in the grand living room of their mansion. I say there with a bitter twist, because even though I had purchased the property years ago and lived in what they affectionately referred to as the guest wing, it was, in fact, my home. This sprawling estate, nestled on 2 acres of meticulously landscaped grounds with an Olympic-sized pool and even a small private lake, was a testament to my late husband's and my careful planning and investment. I'd always wanted to be close to them, to be there for them, to see my grandchildren grow up. So when they outgrew their previous home, the charming, albeit modest, house I had bought for them years before, I found this magnificent property. It offered ample space for all of us, ensuring privacy yet proximity. My guest wing wasn't just a spare room, it was a beautifully appointed, self-contained apartment within the mansion, with its own private entrance, a fully equipped kitchen, a spacious living area, a tranquil bedroom, and even a small patio garden where I loved to grow roses. It was my sanctuary, my long-term residence, a place where I felt safe and grounded, even amidst their increasingly chaotic and demanding lives. I had been sitting quietly in my living room, immersed in a historical novel, the scent of old paper and lavender from my teacup filling the air, when Bronwyn's voice, with her usual forced cheerfulness, cut through the peaceful evening. "Mother! Can you come here for a moment? We have some exciting news." "Exciting news," she said. My gut, my instincts, they were screaming a warning, a dull ache beginning in my chest, but my heart, foolishly, still hoped for something good. Perhaps they finally secured that elusive charity gala funding they'd been chasing for months, or maybe, just maybe, Callan had actually landed a job that wasn't reliant on my generosity, a job that would give him a sense of purpose beyond his gaming console. I carefully placed my book face down on the side table, my old spectacles perched on my nose, and walked into the living room, a hopeful, albeit cautious, smile on my face. The grand room, usually a source of quiet awe for me, now felt imposing, its opulence a stark reminder of the chasm growing between us. Thorn was sprawled on one of the plush velvet sofas, his expensive custom-tailored suit straining slightly over his expanding waistline, scrolling through his phone with a bored expression, barely looking up as I entered. Callan, 22, was lounging on an armchair nearby, headphones on, a condescending smirk on his face, his eyes glued to his phone screen, oblivious to everything but his incessant online game. Lyra, 19, sat primly on another sofa, meticulously filing her nails with a crystal file, looking utterly bored, as if my presence was an inconvenience interrupting her critical beauty regimen. Bronwyn, however, was beaming, clutching a stack of glossy architectural plans as if they were blueprints to heaven itself. "Mother," she began, her voice dripping with an artificial sweetness that always set my teeth on edge, a cloying tone that signaled impending demands. "Thorn and I have been discussing the need for more functional space in the house. You know, with Thorn's new ventures and Callan's entrepreneurial spirit, we really need a proper home office. And with my commitment to wellness, a private gym is just essential, isn't it?" She gestured grandly at the plans, her eyes gleaming with a self-satisfied glow. I nodded slowly, a prickle of unease starting to spread like a cold ink stain through my veins. "Yes, dear, I understand the need for space. A home office and a gym could certainly be beneficial. But we have plenty of rooms, surely? What about the conservatory? It gets such beautiful light, or that unused study downstairs near the library. They are both spacious and rarely used," I offered, genuinely trying to be helpful, trying to find a solution that wouldn't disrupt our fragile peace. Bronwyn waved her hand dismissively, a swift, impatient gesture as if I were suggesting something utterly preposterous, a peasant proposing a chicken coop in a palace. "Oh, Mother, those simply won't do. The conservatory is too far from the main hub of activity, and the study downstairs lacks the proper flow, darling. We need something grander. More integrated. Something that truly reflects our aspirations. And we've realized the perfect location for this ambitious project is your guest wing." Her smile widened, a horrifyingly innocent expression on her face, as if she were delivering the most wonderful news. My blood ran cold. My heart, which had been beating with quiet hope just moments before, now felt like a lead weight plunging into an icy abyss. The air in the room suddenly felt thin, suffocating. My guest wing?" I stammered, my voice barely a whisper, a weak, disbelieving sound that barely escaped my lips. "But that's where I live." The absurdity of it, the sheer audacity, struck me dumb. Thorn finally looked up from his phone, a slow, deliberate movement, a smirk playing on his lips, his eyes glinting with a predatory amusement. "Well, Alara, it's really the only logical option. It's got the best light, the most privacy, and it's spacious enough to accommodate both a state-of-the-art gym and a proper office. Think of the convenience." He said it as if he were discussing moving a piece of furniture, a worn-out armchair perhaps, not a living, breathing human being, his mother-in-law, who had provided him with everything he had. His tone was dismissive, almost contemptuous, as if my presence there was merely a temporary arrangement, easily dismantled. Lyra, without even looking up from her nails, her voice flat and bored, chimed in, "Yeah, Grandma, it's not like you do much in there anyway. Just read your dusty old books." Callan actually snorted with laughter from behind his headphones, a sharp, derisive sound that pierced through the haze of my shock. Bronwyn, seemingly oblivious to the ice forming around my heart, oblivious to the fact that she was effectively dismantling her own mother's life, continued, her voice still sickeningly sweet, "Don't worry, Mother, we've thought of everything. We found you a lovely little apartment across town. It's cozy. A bit smaller, of course, but it's perfectly adequate for one person. It's already furnished, too, so you won't have to lift a finger. We've even paid the first month's rent." She beamed, as if she were presenting me with a gift, a thoughtful gesture, not a forced eviction notice delivered with casual cruelty. The apartment she mentioned was in a part of town I barely knew, far from the familiar streets I had walked for decades, far from the few friends I had managed to cultivate outside their demanding orbit. I stared at them, my vision blurring, the opulent room tilting slightly around me. This wasn't a suggestion, it was an order. A brazen, humiliating displacement, all under the flimsy guise of an urgent, non-negotiable renovation. The sheer audacity, the cold-hearted casualness of it all, the complete lack of empathy, it took my breath away. My throat tightened, making it hard to swallow, hard to breathe. You're kicking me out?" I managed to choke out, the words tasting like ash, raw and bitter on my tongue. Bronwyn's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, a flicker of something akin to discomfort, but then she recovered, her eyes wide with feigned innocence, a master of emotional manipulation. "Oh, Mother, don't be so dramatic. It's not kicking you out. It's a necessary relocation for the family's future. We need this space. It's for our productivity, our well-being. And you'll still be close enough for family dinners, of course, when we invite you." The implication hung heavy in the air, a suffocating blanket. I would be an invited guest in what was once my own home, allowed entry at their convenience, a charity case dining at their table. The thought was a fresh wound. Thorne added, in his smarmy voice, a triumphant glint in his eye, "Think of it as an adventure, Alara. A chance to experience a different part of town. It's got a lovely bus stop nearby, I hear." He smirked, and Callan and Lyra finally took off their headphones, exchanging amused glances with each other. They started to laugh, soft at first, then growing louder, a chorus of mirth echoing in the cavernous room, bouncing off the high ceilings and antique furniture. They were laughing at me. Laughing at my displacement, my vulnerability, my shock, my humiliation. Bronwyn joined in, a little giggle escaping her lips, her eyes crinkling with what looked like genuine amusement, a cruel joy. In that moment, watching them, their faces alight with cruel humor, something inside me snapped. The decades of quiet resentment, the suppressed anger, the myriad small cuts of ingratitude and disrespect, the silent sacrifices, the endless giving, they coalesced into a cold, hard resolve. A terrifying clarity I hadn't known I possessed. My heart didn't break, it solidified, turning into an unyielding stone. I simply nodded, a slow, deliberate nod, and looked each of them directly in the eye, holding their gaze with a steady intensity that surprised even myself. "I see," I said, my voice eerily calm, devoid of any emotion, a flat, dead sound. "Well, thank you for informing me." I turned, walked back to my wing, the sound of their mocking laughter still ringing in my ears, a discordant symphony of my failure. I closed the door behind me, not with a slam of anger, but with a quiet click of finality. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't scream. I just felt a profound emptiness, quickly filled by a terrifying, exhilarating determination. That night, I didn't sleep a wink. Instead, I planned. Every detail, every step, meticulously laid out in my mind. So how did we get here, you ask? How did a loving relationship between a mother and her child, between a grandmother and her grandchildren, devolve into such a grotesque display of entitlement and cruelty? It wasn't an overnight transformation, you see. It was a slow, insidious erosion of respect, fueled by a bottomless pit of expectation, a gradual chipping away at my spirit until there was almost nothing left. I remember the early days, after my husband, their father, passed away. He was a kind, practical man, a successful engineer who believed in hard work and self-reliance. His death, sudden and unexpected, left a gaping hole in my life, and a substantial inheritance. Bronwyn was still young, just starting her life with Thorne, who was then a charming, ambitious, if a little naive, young man. I had inherited a substantial sum, enough to live comfortably for the rest of my days, but I wanted more than comfort for my daughter. I wanted her to have the best, to not struggle as I had during my own youth. So, I paid for their first home, a charming little place in a respectable suburb, nothing extravagant, but enough to get them started, a stepping stone. It had a lovely little garden and a cozy fireplace. I thought I was helping them, giving them a leg up, a strong foundation for their future. But it was just the beginning, wasn't it? The first of many steps down a very slippery slope. When Callan was born, oh, he was such a beautiful baby, with a shock of dark hair and big, curious eyes. And then Lyra came along, a little ray of sunshine with a mischievous grin. I was so proud. I wanted to contribute, to ensure they had every opportunity, every advantage. So, I started paying for their private schooling. Top-tier institutions, of course, with their manicured lawns and impressive alumni lists. My Bronwyn insisted. "Mother, it's for their future. You know how important education is, the connections they'll make." And I agreed. I truly believed it was an investment in their happiness, their success, their future. What mother wouldn't want that for her grandchildren? But soon, it wasn't just the tuition. It was the expensive extracurriculars, the elite sports clubs, the international school trips, ski resorts in Switzerland, cultural exchanges in Rome, safaris in Africa. Grandma, everyone's going. I'll be the only one left out. It's an educational experience. Lyra would whine, her big, innocent eyes wide and glistening with manufactured tears, a master manipulator even then. And I'd cave, of course. How could I say no to those faces, to those pleas that tugged at my heartstrings? The fear of them being left out was a powerful weapon. Then came the luxury cars. Thorne, always with a new business venture that never quite materialized beyond elaborate PowerPoint presentations and vague promises of future riches, needed a professional image. He claimed a sleek Mercedes S-Class was essential for meetings with potential investors. So, I leased him one, justifying it as an investment in their future. A year later, Bronwyn needed a new SUV, for the children's safety, mother. All their friends are chauffeured in luxury vehicles. So I leased her a top-of-the-line Range Rover, a monstrous vehicle that barely fit in a standard parking space. Callan, at 16, demanded a sports car for his birthday, a flashy convertible to impress his friends. All my friends have one, Grandma. You don't want me to be a loser, do you? It's my sweet 16. Lyra, not to be outdone, wanted a convertible of her own when she turned 18. Each time, I'd rationalize it to myself, a desperate internal monologue: they work hard, they deserve it, they're my family, I want them to be happy, what's money for if not for family? But deep down, a tiny voice was whispering, a persistent, uncomfortable murmur, are they truly appreciative? Or are they just expecting it? Are they using me? Vacations. Oh, the vacations. They became an annual ritual, a grand tour of the world, always first-class flights, five-star hotels, exclusive villas. The Caribbean, the south of France, a safari in Africa, yachting in the Mediterranean. Mother, you work so hard, you deserve a break. And we all deserve quality family time. It's so important for bonding. They'd say it with such sincerity, such convincing smiles, and I'd convince myself they truly cared about my well-being, that this was our way of bonding, of creating cherished memories. But I was the one meticulously planning every itinerary, paying for every single meal, every expensive excursion, every little souvenir. I remember one trip to Santorini, a truly magical place, with its whitewashed villages clinging to volcanic cliffs and sunsets that painted the sky in hues of orange and purple. I was standing on the balcony of our opulent cliffside villa, watching the sunset, the Aegean Sea stretching out endlessly before me, when I overheard Callan complaining to Lyra, his voice dripping with boredom, "Ugh, another sunset. Can we just go back to the hotel and play video games? This is so boring. And the Wi-Fi here is terrible." And Lyra, equally unimpressed, replied, "I know, right? And Grandma picked this restaurant again. The food is so bland. I wish we were back in Paris, at that Michelin-starred place." My heart just ached. They weren't seeing the beauty, they were just consuming the luxury, ticking off boxes on a list of Instagram-worthy destinations, utterly blind to the privilege they were experiencing and the person who was making it all possible. They never seemed to consider my own needs, my own desires. I loved gardening, you know? A simple pleasure, a quiet solace. My hands in the earth, nurturing life, watching things grow, it brought me immense joy. But my garden at the mansion, the one I had meticulously planned and tended, slowly became neglected. They needed the space for Callan's new quad bike, or Lyra's outdoor yoga studio, or Thorne's burgeoning collection of antique cars. My quiet evenings, once filled with reading or knitting, were constantly interrupted by their loud parties, their demanding requests for chauffeur services, always me, never a hired driver, or their endless emergencies that always required my immediate financial intervention, usually at the most inconvenient times. I remember one time I was feeling particularly unwell. A nasty flu, couldn't get out of bed, shivering uncontrollably. I called Bronwyn, hoping she might pop over with a bowl of soup, just a little comfort, a simple gesture of maternal care. "Oh, Mother," she said, her voice a little strained, "I'm so sorry, but we're just about to leave for a charity gala. It's terribly important for Thorn's contacts. You know how crucial these events are for his ventures. We'll drop by tomorrow, promise." They didn't. Thorn called me later that night, not to check on me, but to ask if I could transfer some money for an urgent investment opportunity he'd just heard about, something too good to pass up, he claimed. I lay there, shivering, feeling utterly alone, realizing that my well-being was secondary, if it registered at all, to their relentless pursuit of luxury and superficial success. My own daughter, too busy for her sick mother. The sting of that realization was worse than any fever. My modest suggestions for more shared family time, a quiet dinner, a board game, a walk in the beautiful park nearby, were always met with rolled eyes or elaborate excuses. "Mother, we're just so busy," Bronwyn would exclaim, exasperated. Between Thorn's meetings and the children's demanding social calendars, there's barely a moment for ourselves, let alone anything else. Yet, they always had time for lavish restaurant dinners, exclusive club events, and impromptu trips with their friends, all funded, of course, by me. My presence was tolerated, even utilized, but never truly cherished. I was their benefactor, their safety net, their unlimited credit line, but never their equal, never the matriarch whose wisdom and love they sought. I was Alara, the bank. Over the years, the respect had just vanished. It was like watching a slow-motion car crash, a painful, inevitable descent. They'd interrupt me mid-sentence, make jokes at my expense, "Oh, Grandma's just being old-fashioned again." Dismiss my opinions as old-fashioned or naive. They'd leave their bills on my desk, not asking, but simply expecting me to pay them, sometimes with a little post-it note that simply said paid. They'd complain about the quality of the organic groceries I bought for them, or the brand of champagne I stocked in their cellar, as if I were a servant who had erred. My gentle suggestions about their spending habits, my quiet nudges towards fiscal responsibility, were met with scoffing laughter. "Mother, what do you know about managing a modern fortune? You're so old school. You just don't understand how things work today," Thorn would say, always with that infuriatingly condescending tone, a sneer barely disguised as a smile. They lived in a bubble of opulence, completely detached from the reality of how that opulence was sustained. They didn't know, or didn't care to know, that I was the one maintaining their entire lifestyle. I kept it a secret, you see, that I was the true owner of the mansion, registered through a blind trust. I had done it years ago, shortly after my husband's passing, wanting to protect my privacy and manage my investments without undue influence. I wanted them to feel secure, to have a sense of ownership, to truly build a life here without feeling indebted. How foolish I was. I had inadvertently created a monster of entitlement. What would you have done? How much more could you take? Years of being a silent, open purse, of watching my family transform into strangers, into entitled parasites who saw me only as a resource to be exploited. That final act of being kicked out of my own home, the mocking laughter, the casual cruelty, it was a breaking point. It was like a switch flipped inside me, irrevocably changing my internal landscape. The tears I should have cried then, they didn't come. There was no room for them. Instead, a cold, clear resolve settled in, solidifying every fragmented piece of my heart. This wasn't about anger anymore, it was about self-preservation. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, my very essence, which they had slowly drained from me. I had given them everything, and they had given me nothing but pain and disrespect. It was time for the lesson, a hard one, that they had so desperately needed to learn, though they were utterly oblivious to its necessity. I didn't sleep a wink that night. The humiliation burned, a searing flame in my chest, but it also fueled me, sharpening my mind. I sat at my desk in the guest wing, laptop open, the glow of the screen illuminating the determined set of my jaw, my mind racing through years of financial records, legal documents, bank statements. The truth was, the mansion, their luxury cars, their private school tuition, their generous allowances, the endless stream of expenses, it was all funded by me, Elara. Not from some mythical trust fund or an inheritance they mistakenly believed was theirs, but from my investments, my lifetime of careful financial planning, my husband's legacy, managed meticulously. I had set up a blind trust years ago, putting the mansion and most of my assets within it, with strict instructions that I was the sole beneficiary and controller. I had done it as a precaution, a way to manage my wealth discreetly, and to protect my assets from any, shall we say, unwise decisions by my family. It turned out to be the smartest thing I ever did, a shield that now became a sword. The first thing I did the next morning, before the sun had even fully risen, casting a faint pearly light over the quiet estate, was call my lawyer, Mr. Robert Henderson. He was an old friend, a man of impeccable discretion and unwavering loyalty, who had handled my affairs for decades, including the establishment of the Blind Trust. "Elara," he said, his voice raspy with sleep and surprise, "are you all right? You're calling awfully early." "Never better, Robert," I replied, my voice steady, though my hands, clutching the phone, trembled slightly with the weight of my resolve. "I need you to initiate foreclosure proceedings on the property at 14 Willow Creek Lane. Immediately." There was a stunned silence on the other end, a pause heavy with unspoken questions. "Elara, are you certain? That's the Holloway's residence. Your daughter's home." "It's my home, Robert. You know that." "And yes, I am absolutely certain. I want a swift, legal, and non-negotiable foreclosure. And I want them to have absolutely no idea it's coming until the papers are served. Consider this a legal eviction, shall we say, from their current living situation." I paused, taking a deep, fortifying breath. "Furthermore, I need you to draft immediate termination notices for all standing financial arrangements I have with Bronwyn, Thorne, Callan, and Lyra. That includes all allowances, all mortgage payments, luxury car leases, private school tuitions for Lyra, and Callan's business expenses. Every single cent effective immediately. I want it all stopped by the end of the day." Robert was silent for a moment, absorbing the gravity and unprecedented nature of my instructions. He knew how much I had poured into them, how deeply I had enabled their lifestyle. "Elara," he finally said, his voice softer, laced with a hint of concern, "this is a drastic step. Are you prepared for the fallout? For their reaction?" "Robert," I said, a bitter, grim smile touching my lips, "I have been prepared for this fallout for years." "Do it." He didn't argue further. He knew me well enough to understand that once my mind was made up, once that quiet resolve had settled, there was no turning back. He promised to have everything in motion by lunchtime, assuring me of the legal ironclad nature of the trust. Next, I called my bank. I instructed them to freeze all joint accounts I had with Bronwyn, to cancel all credit cards issued to her and Thorne that were tied to my accounts, and to revoke all automatic payments I had set up for their various bills, from their elaborate cable package to their exclusive club memberships. I was clinical, efficient, and utterly devoid of the emotional conflict I had wrestled with for so long. It was like I was watching myself from afar, an old woman finally taking charge of her life, severing the parasitic ties that had bound her. Then came the calls to the private school. Lyra was still enrolled, you see, preparing for her final year. I spoke to the bursar, explaining, calmly, that the tuition payments would cease immediately. They expressed concern, of course, about Lyra's education, but legally, there was nothing they could do. I imagine Lyra's face when the school called Bronwyn about the outstanding fees, when her carefully constructed world of privilege began to crack. Oh, that thought, I admit, brought a small, fleeting sense of satisfaction, a cold comfort. For Callan, I contacted the leasing company for his sports car. Explained that the payments would stop, the lease would be terminated, and the vehicle would need to be repossessed. And Thorne's Mercedes and Bronwyn's Range Rover? Same story. I had leased them directly under my name, so the process was straightforward, if a little cold and impersonal. No emotional appeals, no guilt, just business. As I made those calls, each one a nail in the coffin of my old life, a profound sense of lightness began to unfurl within me. It was like shedding a heavy, suffocating cloak I had worn for decades, a garment woven from obligation and unrequited love. The internal conflict, the endless internal debates about whether I was doing enough, if I was being too hard, if I was enabling them, if I was a bad mother or grandmother, it all dissolved. There was no more conflict. Just a quiet, unwavering certainty. I was doing what I should have done years ago. I was protecting myself, finally. And in a strange, twisted way, I was finally giving them the gift of independence, whether they wanted it or not, whether they were ready or not. By the end of that day, my entire financial apparatus, which had for so long propped up the Holloway empire, was dismantled. The threads of their lavish lives, woven with my money, were cut. And I sat there in my guest wing, sipping a cup of chamomile tea, a strange, profound calm settling over me. The quiet hum of the mansion, usually a backdrop to their demands and laughter, now seemed to whisper a peace, of a newfound serenity. I knew the storm was coming, the inevitable explosion of their fury, but for the first time in a very long time, I was ready for it. I was armed with a clear conscience and a steely resolve. What would they do when they found out? How would they react when their gilded cage shattered? I confess, a part of me, the part that had been hurt and dismissed for so long, was almost eager to find out. Of course, my decision was going to have consequences, wasn't it? The quiet before the storm lasted less than 24 hours. The first domino to fall was Thorne's Mercedes. He called me, absolutely fuming, his voice tight with barely suppressed rage, barely coherent. "Elara. What in God's name is going on? The leasing company just repossessed my car. They said the payment stopped. What did you do?" His voice was a strangled roar, full of disbelief and accusation. I simply said, calmly, my voice flat and even, "The payment stopped, Thorne, because I stopped them. I informed you yesterday that I would no longer be funding your lifestyle. This is a consequence of that decision." He sputtered, his words tripping over each other. "My lifestyle? This is my business vehicle. You can't just do this. Do you know how much this impacts my image? My ventures depend on this." "I'm sure it does," I replied, my voice flat, devoid of sympathy. "Perhaps it's time to find a more, financially sustainable mode of transport. Or a real business that doesn't rely on my handouts." I hung up before he could launch into another tirade, before he could find another way to manipulate me. Then came Bronwyn. Her call was a mix of disbelief and hysteria, her voice trembling with manufactured tears, quickly escalating to a piercing wail. "Mother. Lyra's school just called. They said her tuition isn't paid. And my Range Rover, it's gone. They took it from the driveway. What is this? Is this your idea of a joke? Are you trying to destroy us?" "No, Bronwyn," I said, my voice steady, unwavering. "It's not a joke. It's reality. I'm no longer funding your children's private education, nor your luxury vehicles. You'll have to make alternative arrangements." But why? You always paid for everything. This is insane. How are we going to manage? We don't have that kind of money. You know Thorne's ventures are still developing." Her voice was rising, bordering on a full-blown scream. "That, dear," I said, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor in my voice, "is a problem you will now have to solve yourselves." I hung up again, cutting off her escalating cries. I felt nothing but a quiet, almost clinical detachment, as if I were performing a necessary, albeit painful, surgical procedure. Each call was a thread being snipped, one by one. The true climax came 2 days later. The foreclosure notice had been served, a formal, legal document delivered directly to their bewildered hands by a stern-faced courier. They hadn't expected it, of course. They lived in their impenetrable bubble, assuming their comfort was eternal, their future secure, built on a foundation of my bottomless generosity. They were completely blind to the reality of their situation. I was sitting in my living area, a cup of herbal tea steaming beside me, engrossed in a novel, when I heard the furious pounding on my door. It wasn't the polite knock of a guest, it was the enraged thumping of an entitled family who felt robbed, who felt their divine right had been violated. I took a slow, deep breath, smoothed down my dress, and walked to the door, my heart beating a steady, determined rhythm. I opened the door, bracing myself. There they stood, a tableau of panic and fury, their faces contorted with rage and disbelief. Bronwyn's face was blotchy, tears streaming down her cheeks, mascara smudged, her elegant dress rumpled. Thorn's jaw was clenched, his eyes narrowed to angry slits, his complexion a sickly gray. Callan, usually so aloof and unbothered, looked genuinely terrified, his face pale, his casual arrogance stripped away. Lyra, her carefully manicured nails now bitten to the quick, was sobbing openly, her teenage composure utterly shattered. "Mother! What is the meaning of this?" Bronwyn shrieked, waving the foreclosure notice like a weapon, the legal document crinkling ominously. "Foreclosure? On our home? Are you trying to ruin us? To make us homeless? We have nowhere to go." "Bronwyn," I said calmly, stepping back slightly to allow them to enter, gesturing them into my small, serene living space, a stark contrast to the grandiosity of the main house. "This is not your home. It is my home. And I am simply exercising my right as the property owner to reclaim it." Thorn stepped forward, his voice low and menacing, a desperate edge to his usual swagger. "Elara, this is insane. You can't just throw us out. We're your family. We'll be homeless. Do you know what this will do to our reputation? To my ventures?" His eyes were blazing with a mixture of fear and fury. "Your reputation, Thorn," I said, looking him directly in the eye, my gaze unyielding, "is something you'll have to consider more carefully from now on. Perhaps investing in actual businesses rather than relying on handouts would have been a better long-term strategy. And as for being homeless, I did offer you an apartment, remember? The one you found so cozy?" A flash of pure, unadulterated anger crossed his face, remembering their cruel joke, their dismissive laughter. The irony was not lost on me. Callan, for the first time in years, looked directly at me, his phone forgotten, his voice pleading, almost desperate. "Grandma, please. This is crazy. My friends, they'll laugh at me. How am I supposed to live? What about my ventures? I can't just get a job." "Your ventures, Callan," I replied, my voice soft but firm, a clear boundary finally drawn, "are entirely your responsibility now. Perhaps it's time to find a real job, one that actually generates income, instead of relying on my generosity for your gaming addiction and expensive toys." Lyra, sobbing uncontrollably, rushed forward and knelt at my feet, grabbing my hands, her tears wetting my skin. "Grandma, please. Don't do this. I can't go to public school. And I can't live in a tiny apartment. I'll be miserable. Please, I'll do anything. I'll be good, I promise. I'll even read your dusty old books." She looked up at me with tear-filled eyes, trying to replicate the innocent plea that had worked so many times before, the manipulative act perfected over years. I gently, but firmly, disengaged my hands, pulling them away from her desperate grasp. "Lyra," I said, my voice heavy with years of disappointment, "your promises ring hollow. For years, I gave you everything. Everything you asked for, and more. Homes, cars, schools, vacations, clothes, allowances. I poured my entire fortune into trying to make you happy, to give you lives of comfort and opportunity that I never had." I paused, my gaze sweeping over each of their faces, holding them captive in my gaze. "And what did I get in return? Disrespect. Ingratitude. Mockery. You treated me as an endless ATM, a senile old woman who was good for nothing but her money. You laughed at me when you told me to leave my own home." Bronwyn gasped, a sharp, choked sound. "Mother. How can you say that? We love you. We always have." "Love?" I laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of humor, a bitter echo in the quiet room. "Bronwyn, you didn't love me. You loved what I could provide. You saw me as a means to an end, a convenient resource to fund your extravagant desires. Do you honestly think a loving daughter would orchestrate an eviction of her own mother, offering her a rundown apartment across town, and then laugh about it with her husband and children? My voice rose slightly, but remained controlled, a steely edge to its tone. Do you think a loving daughter would ignore her mother when she was ill, only to call moments later to ask for money for a charity gala that was merely an excuse for another expensive social event? Bronwyn flinched, her eyes wide with a dawning, uncomfortable realization. Thorne looked away, his usual bravado crumbling, unable to meet my gaze. For decades, I continued, my voice gaining strength, I kept silent. I watched you squander fortunes, live far beyond your means, and never once appreciate the source of your comfort. You called this mansion yours, but you never paid a single utility bill, a single property tax, a single maintenance fee. I did. Every single cent came from me. This house, the cars, the schools, the vacations, the clothes, the food on your table, it was all me. I owned it all, through a blind trust, and I paid for it all. And you, I pointed a finger at each of them, my voice firm and unwavering, you had no idea, did you? You just assumed it was some magical, endless inheritance you were entitled to. You assumed someone else was paying for your extravagance, that it was simply your birthright. Their faces, which moments ago had been filled with anger and panic, slowly shifted to a dawning horror. The realization, the understanding of the true source of their wealth, hit them like a physical blow, a punch to the gut. Their eyes darted around the grand living room, then back to me, the senile old woman who had just pulled the rug out from under their entire existence, revealing the flimsy foundation of their lives. You were so busy living your lavish lives, so consumed by your own desires and superficial pursuits, you couldn't even see the person who made it possible, standing right in front of you, I said, my voice now soft, almost pitying, but utterly resolute. And now, it's over. The bank will be here to complete the foreclosure. You have 2 weeks to vacate. As for the rest of your expenses, they are now yours to bear. The well has run dry. There is nothing left for you. Bronwyn opened her mouth, but no words came out, only a choked sob. Thorne's face was ashen, his bravado entirely gone. Callan was staring at the floor, utterly defeated, his phone still clutched in a useless hand. Lyra simply stared at me, tears still streaming, but now with a look of utter shock and incomprehension, as if a fundamental law of physics had just been broken. They tried to manipulate me, of course. Bronwyn pleaded, her voice hoarse. Thorne threatened legal action, which, ironically, he couldn't afford without my money. Callan tried to guilt-trip me, and Lyra cried for hours, a relentless, grating sound. But their pleas were hollow, their threats empty. I had heard it all before, for decades, and this time, their words held no power over me. I simply stood there, unyielding, watching their world crumble before their eyes, knowing it was the only way they would ever truly learn. I had given them every opportunity to change, to show gratitude, to simply be kind. They chose not to. And now, they faced the consequences. So, what happened next? Well, it was exactly as I had planned. The foreclosure went through seamlessly. The Holloways, my ungrateful family, were forced to move out of the mansion. They ended up in a much smaller, far less glamorous house that Thorne managed to rent with what little savings he had, which, it turned out, wasn't much beyond a few months' rent. It was in a less desirable neighborhood, a stark contrast to their previous opulence. Bronwyn had to get a job, a real one, for the first time in her life. She works as a receptionist at a small, bustling office now, something she never imagined she'd have to do, constantly complaining about the long hours, the low pay, and the demands of customers. I hear she finds it utterly demeaning. Callan, after a few humiliating attempts to leverage his non-existent networking for non-existent business opportunities, finally had to swallow his pride and take a job at a local grocery store, stocking shelves. He drives a beat-up old car now, and I hear he's still trying to figure out how to pay for his own phone bill and how to afford his gaming habits. Lyra, well, she hated public school. Absolutely despised it. She struggled academically and socially without the pampered environment and the private tutors she was used to. She's now working part-time at a coffee shop, saving up for community college, a stark contrast to the Ivy League dreams she once harbored, all funded by me. I even heard Thorne had to start driving a taxi on weekends to make ends meet. Their lives changed dramatically, of course. They had to learn to live modestly, to budget, to earn their own keep. They had to learn what it meant to struggle, to face the real world without a safety net woven from my generosity. I heard through the grapevine, from former staff members and local acquaintances, that they still talk about me, usually with a mix of bitter resentment and bewildered incomprehension, wondering how Grandma Alara could have been so cruel, so heartless. They never truly understood, did they? They still don't grasp that I wasn't cruel. I was simply teaching them the most important lesson of their lives, a lesson they were too entitled to learn any other way. And me? My own life became free. Truly free for the first time in decades. The mansion, now officially and completely mine, felt different. Lighter. The air seemed cleaner, the silence more profound, no longer filled with unspoken demands. I renovated the guest wing back into my main living space, creating a cozy, serene haven tailored to my needs, not theirs. I removed the garish additions they had made to the main house, restoring it to its original, elegant charm. I hired a wonderful, respectful housekeeper who understands the value of quiet and order, and for the first time, I felt truly at peace in my own home, a sanctuary of my own making. I finally picked up that old hobby I always wanted to pursue more seriously, painting. I enrolled in a local art class, something I'd always put off because I was too busy attending their endless functions or bailing them out of financial messes. I found joy in mixing colors, in capturing light and shadow on canvas. I met wonderful people there, genuine people who valued me, for my stories and my perspective, not for my bank account. I started volunteering at a local animal shelter, spending my afternoons surrounded by the unconditional love of creatures who simply wanted kindness and warmth, a stark contrast to the transactional relationships I had known. I traveled, but on my terms, to places I always wanted to see, places that spoke to my soul, like the quiet villages of Ireland or the ancient ruins of Greece, not just to their Instagram feeds. I took long, contemplative walks in my beautiful garden, which I've revitalized with native plants and fragrant herbs, tending to each flower with love and care, watching life truly flourish. And I realized the greatest gift you can give someone isn't money, but the opportunity to stand on their own 2 feet. It's the opportunity to learn resilience, responsibility, and the true value of hard work and self-worth. It was painful, incredibly so, to sever those ties, to watch my family struggle, knowing I could alleviate their suffering with a single stroke of a pen. But looking back, it was the most liberating decision I ever made. I lost a family, yes, but I gained myself back, my peace of mind, my dignity, my autonomy. And that, my dear friends, is priceless. That was my story. Our channel is full of life lessons like this one, stories of triumph over adversity, and finding strength in the face of betrayal. If you enjoyed hearing my story and want to hear more, please remember to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next video. What do you think? Did I do the right thing? Share your thoughts with me in the comments, I'll be reading all of them. Thank you for listening.